So I've already pressed recording, so it means it has started recording. But what I'll do usually what I do, I keep the introductory part and the introduction of the interview for the end, and I overlay that at another session, because that introduction I gleaned from the information that we collect during this interview. So
Okay.
there won't be any formal interview. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
There you go. So Josh, tell us first of all, introduce your pet family to my audience.
So my name is Joshua Case. I'm going to be going into the doctoral program at NJCU eventually. For now, I'm working on starting an esports program at my high school. I'm currently a special education teacher at Columbia High School, and some students have approached me to start an esports program. So I've started to do a little bit of my own research on that while I help them form the program.
Mm-hmm. I'll repeat my question. Introduce your pets family to my audience.
Sorry, your what?
Your pets.
My pet?
Yes, pets. I see that you have a cat.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's Casey. She's a kitten. She's a rescue, and we love her. She's a little skittish, though.
I can assume that your cat also plays video games.
Oh, yeah, she's very good at Super Smash Brothers. No, seriously, she watches me all the time and tries to fight the characters on the screen. It's really cute.
Do you have a dog too?
I grew up with dogs. We don't have one right now. I just got married. I live in an apartment, so we're just trying to get ourselves on track right now before we can commit to something like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, I'm assuming you belong to a generation that actually had easy access to video games. What games do you play?
So I've always been an avid Nintendo fan. Like every console I've owned has been Nintendo. I started out on the Game Boy and the Nintendo 64 in the 90s. And that's actually where one of my favorite games that's a popular esport started, Super Smash Brothers.
Oh,
I also play a lot of Legend of Zelda, Pokemon. League of Legends is something that my esports team is starting to get into. I also dabble in a little bit of Blizzard games like Diablo, Overwatch.
So you just mentioned that you moved to an apartment, you got married. Is your wife okay with you playing video games?
She doesn't care for them, but she doesn't care that I care for them. So it works out.
Because I can tell you, if I'm in front of a console like that, for more than 10 minutes, my wife, will start having an itch. What's going on here?
Well, I've generally set a rule for myself that if my wife wants my attention for some reason, I can always just pause the video game, unless it's a certain circumstance like I'm playing online. But then as soon as I'm done, I get offline.
There you go. So you got, that base covered. So now tell me, what characteristics are you looking for? Remember, these were the things, we used to suspend our students for playing video games. And I see that you are an advocate for video games in classrooms. What characteristics make them fit for a classroom?
Well, I find that I've learned a lot from video games growing up in terms of how to A, pace a lesson, and B, introduce new skills. So every good video game has some kind of tutorial where they actually teach you how to play it. And a lot of games, especially the single player ones, will have their own scaffolding system within it. So for example, in a game like, I'll just say The Legend of Zelda. Legend of Zelda doesn't actually have this, but I'm just giving an example. If in The Legend of Zelda, you're going through a dungeon and you get killed multiple times in the same spot, the game will actually scale down the difficulty the next time you do it. They'll realize that you're not quite as skilled as the dungeon wants you to be, so they'll scaffold it in a way that you can still pass through the dungeon while also getting the same experience and using similar skills.
So I'm assuming most of the time students who are into video games are sitting isolated.
Not at all.
How do you handle the emotional and psychological aspects of sitting alone incommunicado for long times? And how do you how do you integrate the social relationship needs of these kids, to be effective human beings, effective employees, and effective career people later on?
Well, first of all, I think there's a misunderstanding there. Most competitive video games are not at all just one person sitting in a room. At least they're online communicating with people that they're playing with. They're online communicating with others. And and a lot of times, especially in esports, they'll literally be sitting next to each other and planning out their strategies and talking as if they're in a regular game. Now, some games are single player in which you don't play online. And I kind of equate that to just sitting down and reading a book. It's the same kind of social aspect.
And one other aspect that that might raise the eyebrows of some parents, that there is shooting involved, and in a classroom setting, how do you answer to those kind of concerns, where these are the very things we shield our students from, and now you're suggesting that we make it mainstream?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of data suggesting that there's no correlation between violence in video games and violence in real life. This has been an age-old question. It's even been talked about in the Supreme Court, but there's really no correlation between violence in video games and violence in real life. But a lot of the times, in terms of bringing the games into the school, of course, there is that mature aspect that we need to watch out for. And usually we won't allow certain kinds of games in the schools. For example, Counter-Strike is a very popular esport. We won't use that in our esports team at Columbia High School. I'm pretty sure most schools would not use that, even at the college level, because it's very realistic shooting. It puts you in a war zone. Mm-hmm. However, there is a similar game in terms of mechanics called Overwatch, which is also a shooting game, but it's a more futuristic, fantasy, cartoonish shooting game. So it's not quite as violent. That has more of a lower rating, while it's still the same mechanics where you take out an opponent using a firearm or a weapon. It's not the same in that it's not as realistic, and therefore, because it's not as realistic, it's not quite as violent in the way that we know violence.
And later on, I'll definitely ask you to recommend us some of these video game titles that we should, we should start from if there is school which doesn't have an esports program, and in the experimentation of what we were having this conversation, I actually took the initiative and asked students, let's do something. Let's bring some equipment and we can start. And I was expecting, that they will ask me to, all right, just open up your computers. I open up a computer lab for them and ask, all right, let's go ahead and start. And here comes a kid, in his arm. He's carrying a big Sony console, PlayStation, and brought in his own monitor and all that. And how am I going to now connect this to my network here? Because remember that we are bound by the HIPAA and SIPA rules and all that, and my network wouldn't allow them to connect. So how do you overcome these kind of hurdles, wherein the special console, like you said, Nintendo console? How would you connect Nintendo consoles to a secure school environment? And I'm pretty sure, and at your workplace also, you have these network firewalls and network restrictions, which won't allow any device to connect to the internet. So how do you overcome these kind of hurdles?
Well, right now we're working very closely with our IT department. They and the library media specialists are pretty much on board with us. In fact, they're helping in a lot of ways. They're not quite sure about what they're getting themselves into, I'll admit, but they are open to it. One thing to note is that we're not actually playing PlayStations or Xboxes. We are going to use a Nintendo Switch for Super Smash Brothers, but that's going to be a personal Nintendo Switch for now. And eventually we're going to get one, and we're not going to play on a network with that. That's only going to be a local connection. So right now I can tell you that our IT department, in informal talks with them, is very wary about playing online, even with our PCs, simply because of the idea of cyberbullying, which is a real threat. It's something that I have to monitor. but they are open to connecting all the computers in one lab through a local connection so that the student on this computer can play the game with a student on the computer across the room. So really, it's all about selecting the games and selecting the type of gameplay you're going to do. There are ways around it, and there are ways to do this without an online connection.
So that means you do not recommend online game environment at all at this point?
I'd say it depends on the school, and it depends on the person who's running the organization, the adult in the room. So if we ever do that, I'm going to be monitoring the computers very heavily. I'm going to be making sure that no abuse is going on online and nobody is abusing our students online. And that's going to be on me, and I'll probably have someone else helping me with that because that's a very big undertaking.
Okay. And when you're saying local network, so now we are talking about having a local switch and our own little router and even a server, or you don't need a server for that?
Well, no, I don't think you need a server for a console because most consoles can have up to 4 players playing at one time. So the way Smash Brothers tournaments work at the local level. So for example, if some video game store is hosting a tournament, they'll have multiple switches set up, and they'll have people playing matches on each of the switches, just the 4 people on that one switch or the 2 people on that one switch, and then they'll have a bracket somewhere in the room with the tournament posted, and everyone will be playing each other using their own controller on the same switch. So it's not even a local connection. It's just multiple people playing the same game on the same system.
And I think the next question that automatically comes to my mind, and how do you handle the health effects of esports as a pursuit? Naturally, it's a sitting game, and I'm assuming that most games that you're referring to are just sitting games. Although I understand the Switch can be used as an active, moving around kind of a console also for students to be physically active. But most games are sitting games. Isn't it addictive? Even when they leave school, they go home and they continue where they left off, and start sitting again.
Well, that's really about moderation. I would never suggest a kid plays the game for more than a couple hours at a time. I wouldn't suggest, in the same way that I wouldn't suggest maybe a football player practices for about 12 hours a day. So when you're not playing the video game, I would suggest that you go out and get some exercise, go for a walk. All I'm saying is a lot of students do make it their entire life, but it really shouldn't be. All in moderation.
Yeah, especially the ones who are streaming live to Twitch and all that, and YouTube. They are spending days just sitting there, and they get, because of the recognition they get, because of the applause they get, it becomes addictive, both in terms of the game itself and also the recognition they are getting, the motivation they're getting from that kind of applause.
Well, that really depends on how much you're playing, based on how much you need to do other things. So, for example, I have here written down Team Liquid, a professional League of Legends team, plays about 50 hours per week. But that's their full-time job. They make a lot of money doing this. So no one would tell me don't go to work for 50 hours a week.
Now, let me tell you, at my workplace, as an administrator, I have to communicate. I have to spend a lot of time in front of a computer. But I've made a little improvement in my routine. I don't sit. I have what they call a walking treadmill, and I have my computer in front of me and on a raised desk, and I'm walking while I'm working at the computer. I'm just thinking, is it possible to just thinking out of box here and being a little creative here? Is it possible to walk and play these games at the same time? If we could afford these walking treadmills, and by the way, this is not a regular treadmill. It's a flat walking treadmill. It doesn't have high speed. If we could arrange these kind of treadmills for our students, would it be possible to overcome that concern, which is a real concern, and because of the addictive nature of these games, Is it possible to walk and play these video games at the same time?
Well, that really depends on the person, especially as a competitive esports player. There's got to be a lot of focus on the game. It takes a lot of concentration. Your eyes cannot leave that screen. Your hand cannot leave that controller or keyboard. But theoretically, it's physically possible. I mean, I'll be honest. I take my Switch with me when I go to the elliptical and I play while I'm working out. So it's certainly physically possible.
It is doable. What you say is doable.
It's doable, but that really, again, depends on the player. If you have a competitive esports player that can do that and still be just as good on the elliptical as they are sitting down at the game, then by all means.
Oh, okay. So there's one possibility to try at least instead of
Yes.
Because yeah, that's what I was hoping, that there's no a definitive no answer to that. But if there's a possibility, we can definitely try.
Yes,
and
there is a possibility.
So now the next thing is, what are the most common gaming titles that you would recommend in a classroom setting? And what we'll do later on, we'll insert a slide here in this interview, so that the people who want to refer to these titles, they could see and they could find out where to get these from. And also I would request if you could go outside of just the Nintendo or the domain and recommend some titles that are available for other consoles also, that would be great help.
Absolutely. So the thing is, there's lots of titles coming out all the time. It's a constant stream of new games and new ideas. In fact, since that presentation that I saw you at back at William Patterson, a whole new game has come out, and it's become wildly popular. Over 1 million players already.
Oh my God.
That game is called Apex Legends. It's available on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. It's kind of similar to Fortnite in that it's a battle royale game. And Fortnite, of course, is one of the biggest games out there right now. And that's only been around for about a year. Now, there are lots of titles that have been mainstays for a very long time. Counter-Strike, which I mentioned before, has been around since I was in middle school in different forms. Rocket League has been out for a few years. One of the more popular esports titles in high schools, and I'll get into why that is in a little bit, is League of Legends. That's been around since about 2009.
And now, if we acquire, some of these, what are do they come with some kind of, because, we are talking about now in classroom setting, are there any sources of esports curricula for these games, which we can link to not only the ISTE standards for students and teachers, but also something, that is credit-worthy. Naturally, when we are now trying to incorporate these courses, and we have to award them certain credits at the end of the year, and the accreditation with the accreditation agencies for these courses and all that, what curriculum are acceptable to these accreditation agencies in your experience?
So that really depends on the school, what they want to do as a curriculum. What I would recommend is a curriculum designed by the High School Esports League. That's the international league in which students can play online tournaments as part of their esports program. Columbia High School is looking into doing that, and there's about 20 other schools in New Jersey that are currently part of the High School Esports League.
And now, the high school I'm sorry, sorry to cut you off here. No problem. Is there a website? Is there a link, that they can go to access these resources?
Absolutely. highschoolesportsleague.com.
Okay, highschoolesportsleague.com. So we'll add that also in our reference here.
Yeah, and they have everything you want. They have free written lessons. They have they have content standards already in there. They have ideas. They have ways they can modify it. It's a great resource, and it's not the only one. High school esports is still a relatively new thing, so there's people developing these resources constantly today and for the future as well.
And what colleges do you know accept these kind of credits?
Well, I don't know about the credits, but I can tell you which colleges are really big in the esports scene right now, giving scholarships and having esports majors. Ohio State is one of the biggest ones right now. They actually have an esports team that crosses over into multiple different departments, and they're building an esports arena. Same thing with University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and UC Irvine. And there are also a lot of colleges that have esports as a major, such as Emerson College.
Hmm.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. These colleges are growing tremendously in terms of their esports offerings.
And you mentioned the esports arena that they are building. That means that there are options and opportunities available for these students to compete in tournaments and competitions. Is there some available in the tri-state area nearby us?
So actually, I'm starting to form a connection with Helix Esports in North Bergen. Now this is a place that has over 130 PCs. They have Xboxes, they have PlayStations, they host tournaments constantly. And right now, they're also trying to form their own high school esports league in a sense, and also partnerships with schools. We're actually talking to them right now about having Columbia come in maybe once a week or possibly once a month to use their computers and compete against other schools in the Hudson County area.
Do they charge money for that?
They say for about 4 hours of play a week, they're going to charge each student $10.
Or just $10? Oh, that's not bad.
Yes, they have. It's already cheap enough on their own. I mean, I have a membership there myself, but they have special deals for high schools that come in as groups.
And this is North Bergen, right?
North Bergen, correct. Right on JFK Boulevard.
Oh, okay, because we can also add this reference as a reference slide for those who want to take a look at that. And
absolutely, I'm more than happy to give them a shout out.
And what about? Say it again.
They've been absolutely fantastic to us. We have great staff and a great facility.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Now, tell me, what is have you read some research on esports that tell us about the overall impact on the students' academic well-being?
So right now, me personally, I have no research that I found on academic impact, but I can tell you that there are lots of connections to the ISTE standards and also to career paths. You don't have to just play video games in order to be part of an esports program. There are opportunities for broadcasting, because a lot of teams like to live stream their games. They like to live stream their tournaments. There's opportunities for journalism. There's opportunities for marketing. It's a multidisciplinary field. And
I see now we see that this is expanding into all those other ancillary skills that can be accrued through this process. And also, I think, so the team, and again, we are talking about the 21st century skills, where if it becomes a formal competition or tournament, now we're talking about collaboration, we are talking about equipment handlers, we are talking about the people who are the audience people, and they are rooting for their teams. So I can see a lot of ancillary social career benefits also coming out of just one game. And then related to the 21st century career skills also. So it's not, I think, you have enlightened us to all those areas which probably were vague in our minds when we were talking about their benefits, as well as the fears that valid fears parents might have about these kind of courses. So I think an education like you are providing us on this topic would help a lot to allay those kind of fears. So thank you very much. So the next, I think we're coming towards now the end of this. Have you met some parents in your experience, and what were they saying about your endeavors? Are they on board, with what you're doing, or they're saying, man, you gotta calm down a little bit? Our kids are spending a lot of time in front of the computer already, or in front of the consoles already. So have you met some of the parents?
Well, I'll start by saying this. If you're a parent and you don't want their child to join esports, they're probably not going to join esports, because there's a lot of things you have to go through in order to be part of the team. I'm currently drafting up a permission form for things like going to Helix, for things like admission fees and all that stuff. I do know I have a friend who works at the esports program, who actually started the esports program in Weehawken in high school. And one of his colleagues was telling me recently, because one of his colleagues from Weehawken came to Columbia, now works there. His colleague was telling me that anyone that joins the esports team competitively has to own the game at home. So if they're not playing much at home due to parental restrictions or anything like that, chances are it's not going to be it's not going to be, they're not going to be able to do everything they want to do with the esports program as well, because they have to practice at home as well if they're going to be competitive.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, in terms of the parents I've interacted with, I only have one story right now. It's not really a story; it's just a fact. I have a parent right now who is emailing me every couple of weeks or so, asking, "Hey, when's the esports program ready? My son wants to join it. When's the esports program ready?" I think a lot of parents realize through their kids how big a deal esports is becoming, and they want their kids.
It's not the kid himself, sending you all those emails.
Oh no, it's not. Actually, funny thing, I haven't even met the kid yet.
Okay.
But I keep telling her, what the truth is. We're still building the program right now. We'll let you know when the first meeting is.
I think
we can't.
I had this opportunity last night. We had this homeschool council meeting, and we had about 100 parents showed up, and I was able to pitch in because this is all, like I said, it's in just the brainstorming phase right now, and we still have to fight with all those hurdles. We have to fight with our technology department, and we have to get all the equipment yet. But I was able to pitch in, and the parents, I think I could see the excitement already building up among the parents. Probably they were familiar with these things more than I did, and I saw the response, which was encouraging. And we are planning to start off most probably next year. We will put on a fast track, and we might need your expertise, to come in and talk to some of the folks at our place, and tell them firsthand. They will listen to this. This is one great evidence and validation. And if you could also stop by, that would create a league of little legends of our own. We'll be legends at some point, because we're at the forefront of this new onslaught of this new phenomena that we are building in esports. Was there an esports thing last year?
I'm sorry?
Was esports a big thing last year or the year before?
It's been building very rapidly. I think it's been a thing in most schools for about 2 or 3 years, but there's a lot of schools who are in their first year right now.
So we are not far behind.
Not at all.
Okay.
You're right in the thick of it, actually.
Great. So what does an esports classroom actually look like? Let's say if I have 25 students, how many of them are playing and how many of them are watching?
So usually an esports classroom will have 6 to 12 PCs in it. And these PCs typically would be a high-end gaming PC. But I was saying before, like League of Legends is a very popular esports game. The reason why is because it's so low res that it can actually run on a lot of computers that the schools currently have. Like at Columbia High School, we're looking at some of our computer labs, and all of them could run League of Legends, even though the computers are somewhat out of date.
But you do need to change the keyboards for those, or they can work, with the traditional Staples keyboards?
Well, depends on the game. For a game like Overwatch, yeah, you would need a high-end keyboard. But for League of Legends, it really requires the basics.
So it means you don't need to have just the consoles. You can have PC-based games too.
Almost all the esports that are worth your time are based on PC.
Now that is giving me more possibilities than we had before. Like you said, that the kid who brought his PlayStation in our place, that didn't go far because we had to stop it. It couldn't connect to the network. But if we could start with the PC-based games, and you suggest League of Legends would be a good start for most schools.
Yes, and I'd say League of Legends because in terms of how high-end the PC has to be, League of Legends is the exception, not the rule. League of Legends can run on a low-res PC. I actually have League of Legends on my MacBook. But games like Overwatch really need the state-of-the-art technology. They need like the most recent gaming design PCs. A typical PC will not cut it. So one of the things we're looking into at Columbia High School is getting a grant or fundraising for 6 to 12 high-end PCs, so that one day we could play Overwatch as an esports team at Columbia High School or another game similar to it. Right now we're only playing League of Legends and Super Smash Brothers, not entirely because we want to, but because we can.
Got it. Now, you said about 6 to 12 PCs in a classroom.
Yes.
So let's say I have 24 students in the classroom. So I'm assuming that about 12 students are playing and 12 are watching, or 12 are also involved in some activity at that point.
So you could have 12. You could have some of the other 12 streaming or playing a console game, or splitting up in another way. But the reason I said 6 to 12 is because a typical competitive esports team on a PC game will have 6 players. So you would have 6 at a minimum, but if you really want to have team versus team, you'd have 12. But you could certainly have more if you want.
Great. And I believe if we could display whatever they are playing on, because we have large TVs and display monitors in classrooms, so that means that some of these can be displayed for the audience also on larger monitors, just to create an excitement.
Absolutely. In the computer lab that we're currently looking at right now, it's just a computer lab with a smartboard at the front of the room. So we're planning to hopefully stream the games onto the smartboard so that spectators can watch.
Great. Josh, it has been a pleasure talking to you. You have educated us a lot, and I can tell you as a parent myself, some of the concerns that have always been in the back of my mind, you have answered those concerns too. And I think, that will make, my relationship, with my own son a little better, because I have a different perspective now on this. And also, I believe our students can gain something that is relevant to their generation. And I can see, because all the students, when they're sitting alone, and we have to pull them away from the computers, that's what they're doing. They are playing these very video games. And let's make it a little more legit for them, and we'll make it formal so that when they play, they won't have to play with any sense of guilt. So this will be a guilt-free play from now on. So
never know, they might get full state.
That's right. So I thank you very much for your time, and this was fantastic conversation. Unless you have a special kind of a final word for us or an advice for our audience, it's my pleasure talking to you.
Of course. So basically, a lot of people think that video games are bad for students. I grew up on video games. I became what I am because I played a lot of video games. And so I would not say that video games are typically a bad thing for a student to be playing. Of course, play in moderation, but you never know. It could become a career. It could become a lifelong passion that drives them to do other things as well. I can confidently say I would not be entering the doctorate program or doing this at my current school if I had been playing video games for a long time as a kid as well. You never know where to go.
Thank you. A great ending motivation advice for our audience. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.